Good morning, everyone. I see Damon online and Jonathan Fitch is online. Brian Kelly is out for the rest of the summer. Where is he?
Italy.
He's in Italy.
Oh, it's too
Okay.
bad. Those academics.
How does he wake up every day?
Well, and he has to do it every year too. It's just.
He has.
Just horrible.
Okay, so for the record, I have to say we are recording the meeting. Welcome to the July DAP. Back so quickly. We just have one item, 7749 Old Georgetown Road. It's the second sketch plan presentation. And at the last DAP meeting, if you recall, there was a couple comments from the DAP for them to return with further refinement of the Old Georgetown Road facade and perhaps grounding the angularity on the St. Elmo facade and somehow addressing the cantilever on Old Georgetown Road. And so with the submission, the applicant team actually did a pretty good job showing side by side the analysis of how the design has addressed those comments. And so I'll hand it over to the team for the presentation.
Okay, I was gonna say what you said, so I'm gonna, I was well just send it straight to the architect, because I was gonna summarize what we had looked at, but you gave a perfect summary, so I want to turn it over to the folks. Marish, you want to introduce yourself? Sami is also someplace. Where'd he go?
Barcelona, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sami is someplace we should all be too, so that's why he's not here, so.
It wasn't hot enough here.
Right. That's right.
So I'm Marius Radulescu, Deskenai. I met most of you. Yeah. A short introduction.
Much more pleasant than Sami anyway.
Right,
Chris, why don't you show what we studied and then we can talk about it.
That's good. Good morning, everyone. Record, my name is Chris Huffer with SKNI Architecture. Just for the record, between what we sent, we've tweaked some of the graphics a little bit for this presentation. So we went back to the massing colors that we previously showed you instead of kind of the brownish gray. But all of the content is the same, nothing changed, just kind of graphically make it a little bit clearer so we can present and talk today. Just to remind everybody, if anybody wasn't here last time, we're at 7749 Old Georgetown Road, right in the middle of the Woodmont Triangle District. It's the location of the current Woodmont Grill at the intersection of Old Georgetown Road, St. Elmo, Arlington Road, and Wilson. So at that kind of large intersection there. So last time when we were here, as was mentioned, we were asked to kind of look at further refinement of Old Georgetown Road facade and evaluate the connection between the building podium, tower, and base, and if any of the angularity that we've been working with could come meet the ground and have a little bit more of a connection between the base and the podium, and to look at the materiality, even though it's a little early in sketch plan, but look at kind of what we can do with the materiality of the tower and setbacks on the Old Georgetown Road to kind of emphasize. So just jumping right in, this is the two diagrams. Obviously on the left is the St. Elmo facade, and on the right is the Old Georgetown Road facade of the tweaks that we've made since we met with you last. So starting on the left here on the St. Elmo facade, as I mentioned, one of the comments was how can we utilize this interesting chevron geometry and how can we integrate it with the base? Took a step back, looked at kind of the angles at which we are utilizing and what can we do to kind of bring more of these areas to the ground. So what we've done is tweak the angles and kind of brought things back a little bit so we can have more of a substantial part of this angularity come to the base here. So you can see everything in green here is in the same plane and coming down to the ground. So everything's within the build to line, creating these small little bay conditions to give that shifting of the facade as we go up. On the corner here to kind of really emphasize where we are putting the retail, we have recessed the retail around on both sides a little bit, but utilizing the same geometry. So you still get this massing feeling coming all the way down to the base, but kind of giving prominence in that small additional recess of the retail here to kind of emphasize what's emphasize what is coming to the ground and what is going up. Turning to the old Georgetown road facade, previously everything we had angled corner, and then everything was kind of flat, which we discussed of how can we utilize this geometry on the other side. So what we did is we looked at it, and part of the tweaks for the angles that we did was so we could make it work here, utilizing that same wave pattern on the podium floors. We brought around to Old Georgetown Road, and with the goal of bringing down all the language that we can to the ground here as well. So you kind of get, if you look at it holistically coming around here, you have the base and the podium kind of wrapping itself around the corner. So you have building coming down on either side of its main corners here, as well as looking at the materiality. And as we mentioned, sketch plan, we're still exploring what materiality we're going to do, but with the idea that, looking at it, we are planning on having this back plane be a different lighter material. So I think in the presentation materials we'll go through is you'll see that there is a tone on tone color where we are shifting the color and the materiality. Might be of different material, might just be a tone of the same material, but the idea is that shifting it to a lighter color back here is going to emphasize the step back that we're doing. Previously, we had just had a small step back here where the balconies are, kind of recessing that and bringing it all the way down to the base. Instead, now we've just completely stepped back that piece, so it's completely detached from the podium here. So we believe with the actual step back and the materiality change that we are potentially looking at doing, next step of site plan will really help emphasize those step backs here. Just kind of go in. So this is the updated coloring scheme, just to be a little bit
I
brighter.
assume everybody loves the colors. We wouldn't want to change it there.
So you can see here, how that articulation is brought through without the highlighted colors, and everything's kind of around here, and that lighter shade helping really detach from that comparison of the old Georgetown Road, which is kind of what we were primarily tasked with re-looking at this stage of this last time. Here is where our current design is. So you can see here, bringing this language down, stepping the back really kind of helps detach these elements from the rest of the tower, emphasizing base here, especially with the added articulation as well. Just looking south on Old Georgetown Road at the St. Elmo facade here. Beyond the right side of Wilson Lane and south on the sidewalk. Area, so really see that same articulation brought around and how it steps back. So just a couple quick snippets of the same massing, focusing on the base and the articulation, some of those design guidelines that we've been following for the base and the podium on the effort to bring that articulation, activation, and variation of the base and the materials around this facade. So see how our plan is to bring all these elements down and how that connects all the way up, and how that articulated facade helps limit the apparent face of this elevation, as well as the other. So it kind of helps break it down, but also how it integrates with potential balconies and bringing more activation and eyes on the street. Doing similar moves on Old Georgetown. So I think that's, we wanted to keep the presentation fairly short and sweet, since we didn't have a ton to look at, so we'll open it up for discussion.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing was deciding the retail in the corner, which is not, from a retail perspective, it's not that important. So we let the design drive. No retailer wants us to do what we're doing. But it's a small retailer. So it allows us to, I think all the moving and jogging that really allowed that main corner to come to the ground the right way. And then, losing a little bit of square footage to create the detachment up above. I think you know, those are kind of the big concessions, so to speak, to try to respond to the comments you made. Obviously, a lot of this will be detailed out in the articulation in terms of, you know, how, as Chris said, whether it's tone on tone where we step back or totally different material, we've got to really do a lot of study. And we got to do the interior layouts.
Yep.
Really refine them to go, is this precisely where you want a balcony and all those, you know, details that would go from the next stage. But hopefully you'll find this responsive to the things you raised. The building has gotten better. It's heading in the right direction. I think the lower level feels substantially different. And I think the massing just works as you go upstairs. So with that, welcome any comments, questions.
I appreciate you clarifying which portions of the facade actually, come into the ground on San Elmo. Yes, that definitely makes a difference where the solid parts or different material will be meeting the site. I have, I guess, not a concern, but I am looking forward to seeing you in the next iteration of the design where, you will show that those portions are not two-dimensional as they look right now because we're in very conceptual phase, and where they actually have some dimensionality to them, right? Because whether it's brick, masonry, or whatever solid material that will be. Because right now it looks a little bit more 2D applied, right? But I see the concept, and yes, it definitely helps to the ground in the building. And then that middle part, the massive express, turning the corner on Old Georgetown, right? Where you cut or reduce the number of balconies. So that's an improvement.
You know, I think you listened obviously to the idea of wrapping the podium around Old Georgetown. So it's not two completely different podium elevations. And I think that's a very big improvement. And at this point, I just have one problem. And if you could go to, I think, the Wilson elevation, looking at the corner there. The most prominent element of this tower is the corner, right? You're creating a tower there. Yet you've recessed the base even more. So this tower looks like it's floating above the street. And it's just so anti-gravity that I think I like the idea of this little paper plaza on the corner. But it just feels like you're going to get crushed right there. Like that whole tower wants to come down and just smash you, and because gravity takes over. And so I'm wondering if there's some way, some element, something that you can do that helps to support that tower from the ground, so that it isn't just floating right there. It's that's the only, at this point, at least, it's the only comment on concern that I have.
I mean,
Well, I don't know.
I like the floating part of it, but I want to, we want it.
Well, it's a
What-
cool thing, but it's just, I think that you have to, at some point, you have to kind of acknowledge gravity. And I think in all.
The structural engineer would argue.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
I'm sure it's not going to fall down. It's a perceptual thing. And I just think that that corner is so important vertically, but at the first floor, it's like, it's just not there. And perhaps there's some very ornate column at the corner that kind of holds that up that you can walk around, but then, that might be too flimsy, right? Then you almost think that maybe the column would be crushed, but I don't know. What does everybody else think? I think I think it's an issue.
I think that that proportion of the grounding pieces is too far away, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the column that comes down, but the grounding
Got a better angle.
base.
Do you have the lower base picture?
Yes, something that focuses a little bit closer on.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to zoom in a little. bit.
But
There
also-
was the one that, there you go.
Once you add the glazing, it's not gonna be solid versus a void. You're gonna see the shyness, if you want, or the transparency of the glazing. So that will rebalance the notion of solid versus void.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So once the materiality and the size of the glazing, it's really going to feel differently. And one thing we were considering is, this is that retail corner. It is gonna read differently at the base because a retailer is gonna be there. And they may, even if we give them a spot, it may interrupt kind of that feeling of the tower coming to the ground. So, currently the idea is, we're going to be articulating this in a way. So obviously it doesn't feel like mass on mass, like you said, big and small, but also helps really keep this as that singular element coming down and holding the corner really that can detach a little bit from whatever funky retailer comes in and wants to interrupt the facade. I think, a good example of retailers coming in is the Salt Line 2 blocks away in Bethesda, where they have their,
Mhm.
completely, honestly, kind of ridiculous facade that just comes in here and doesn't work with anything. So I think that's always a risk you run with.
So if you brought that corner all the way down to the ground in glass, does it violate any of the setback requirements?
So the corner is still projecting at these points here, 3 feet past the build to line.
Okay.
Still within our property line, but it's the
Understood.
build to line.
I'd like to make sure you understand that this is not a unanimous thinking on the part of the DAP. I'm very enthusiastic about that corner. And would encourage you to resist bringing mass to the ground at that point. I mean, there's a big difference between a party and a building, we know. But I just hope that whatever you come back with next, I can remain as enthusiastic about. I think this is a terrific building. And I think it would be an enormous positive addition to the architectural character of Bethesda. So I just don't want to quibble about the corner. In fact, it's not a huge cantilever.
It actually is a pretty big cantilever for this height of the tower. I mean, this is a really significant cantilever right there.
I think that
What is it,
it's
about
not
10
it's-
feet?
Yeah, we're not talking about this.
On the
Not the
corner.
Kennedy- This is not the Kennedy Center, for God's sake.
I wonder
This
if,
doesn't look like it's going to fall down.
First, where's
There-
the cantilever is about 5 or 6 feet,
Corner, it's
maybe
about
5 or 6,
7.
5 or 6 feet.
Yeah, so we're trying to keep it within 7.5.
I mean,
feet.
could that left panel go back with, with the retail setback? Could it go back so that the whole tower actually represents or frames the wider space below?
Let me make sure which panel you're.
That one, it's that one there,
Oh, bring that.
where his hand is, yeah, you see it?
Don't recess the
That
whole
one.
thing, just
If
recess.
that slid back as
Well, so right, so another option sort of tectonically is that rather than this, even as glass coming down and then stopping, I think there's a way to treat sort of that piece right there. And I think Paul's starting to look at it.
he's pointing to the
It makes it,
left side there for you guys.
but it's this piece, rather than it coming down and just stopping flat. If
Mhm.
there's a way to use the language to sort of camp that in so that it's more like a pendant piece attached rather than a tower that has no base. You know what I mean? Like a bay window, but like a delightful bay window. But it's, I mean, just tectonically a way to avoid having a tower that has no base.
Yeah, because the guidelines, they're very clear in that we want with 4-story podiums, and they actually encourage punctuation of the podium on prominent corners with towers that ground down to the ground. So there's a couple of ways to do it, and I think Jonathan has a different opinion as well here, but you could certainly bring elements down. You could look at perhaps that secondary shed awning that's shown there. that's so thin as compared to everything that's coming down on it. And it has this horizontal slot between it and the bottom of the tower mass. There may be an opportunity to make it more robust so that it feels connected to the tower and perhaps turns down at some point along the design of the storefront. So you feel it becomes more of a portal that the tower kind of sits on, because I think you guys are trying to create this idea of a corner portal, right, as opposed to a corner mass. And there may be some opportunities there to explore that. And also, I think just simply aligning the storefront crenellations with the mass that's coming from the top. I know it's extending into the into the corner space a little bit, will help. Like even the lines of the crenellation of the storefront don't really match up with the lines of the building above. And even I think this is very small details we're talking about here, which is great because I think overall the building looks fantastic. But those might be some suggestions to consider, and they might thread the needle here, so to speak.
So if I could weigh in, I think there's a really nice refinement that's going on since we last saw it. And I'm happy to see you guys have really kind of taken to heart the comments that the AP has had. A lot of this now is going to depend upon obviously the materiality of the windows, the fenestration, and that perhaps, that corner becomes predominantly glass, and that may take the edge off, let's call it the gravity at the same time.
That corner.
But I also like Liza's idea of chamfering this in some way and responding to the retail base. I think there's some good suggestions out there. I think in summary, I think you've made a nice evolution. Now, I have really bad eyesight. I'm going to see what this note says right here. You can't even read it.
That's day condition.
I did notice in one of your earlier drawings, there appears to be a shadow line between the ground floor and the floor above. And maybe that's just a graphic error, but it's not.
There
If you
was
go,
more before, Chris, I think.
It was, before it was.
In the prior one?
no, if you go back, I think it's to slide 6. Or A6, maybe not slide 6. Yes, see the shadow line on the right-hand side between
Here.
there, right there.
Yeah.
Is that really a change in plane?
Yes, currently. I mean, I think some of this is we're looking at what we can push and pull in terms of how.
Yeah, I guess I'd ask why change that plane? Why not just bring the base all the way to the street?
So I think looking at it, and I think that's something we need to continue refining with the materiality of how this is going to work.
Right. I mean, that's a real nit, but.
Yeah. I think the goal, I think, for this corner regardless is to still, is have as much of this materiality come down and represent what's above it as possible. So yeah, the simplest solution might be just retweak that a little bit and bring it all the way down. But we're trying to utilize that same consistent wave, which then adds a little projection somewhat on the other side. So we're trying to balance the two. But I think once we get into the details of windows and the stone, that'll probably solve itself out.
Also, we study how the base interacts with the retail base or the ground floor plane with the rest of the base. So one thing is to bring materials down in a coplanar way. The other one is to imply the base by having just the fold be coplanar or a continuous line. And then you follow that line rather than following your plane. So it's a more subtle way to achieve the same thing.
Are there any other comments from our panel members online?
This is Damon, guys. I was unfortunately unable to be in the June meeting, but I reviewed those slides and took a look at the iteration or the evolution here. And I agree with most of the other panelists that this looks like a very nice building, very well scaled for the site. And it sounds like all the comments are really revolving around this retail space. So I would just suggest to the applicant here, just come come back with a couple of different options at the next level of review, just focusing on this ground plane. And, I think we can continue the discussion at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to give you the details and the materiality and then really revisit. Does it feel like it's floating? Is the building light enough that you'd rather have? I mean, I think you could, depending on your view, you might look at everything glass on that corner and go, you know what, we want it to float. So I do think it's incumbent on us to get the details in there and then maybe even come back to the DAP with 2 or 3 different ideas about how that interacts at that corner. Because I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. This is, we're fine with this, level of commentary because everybody's, as someone said, we're focusing on details. That's a good thing. But the details will matter on that corner because it's, you're going to see this from a long way away and so many people come to that intersection.
Yeah.
And sit
It's very
because of the way the light system works.
Yep.
You spend, there's a lot of people who spend time looking at that corner. So we're going to want to get it right. Just not that people.
Farmers market every weekend staring at it.
And that's what I'm saying. I mean,
Great.
I live nearby this, so I drive this corner all